can Gillian Anderson's new Netflix drama bring a fresh take on the BBC's Prince Andrew interview? At the end of the first week of Scotland's new hate crime law, is the nation further forward? And 60s icon Lulu doesn't speak before noon. Sadly, not an option for our panel, but would you consider zipping it till lunchtime? With me, Rona Dougal, in for Shereen for the next couple of weeks. My guests today are journalist Angela Haggerty, Herald columnist Alison Rowett and Big Issue editor Paul McNamee. Good morning to you all.
Good morning.
And coming up at the end of the first week of Scotland's new hate crime law, is the nation further forward? We'll also look at the over 65s feeling left behind by the relentless charge of technology. And later, it was one of the most astounding moments in TV history. But can Gillian Anderson's new Netflix drama bring a fresh take on the BBC's Prince Andrew interview? Plus, 60s icon Lulu doesn't speak before noon. Sadly, not an option for our panel. But would you consider zipping it till lunchtime? There's much more to come besides. Let's have a listen to some of the week's big moments.
Scotland have managed to police Old Firm games and football matches for many, many years previously, done so very, very well. Let me just be clear about the Hate Crime Act that's come into place. Remember, the new stirring up offences have a very high criminal threshold indeed. Your behaviour has to be threatening or abusive and intended to stir up hatred.
An hour of television can change everything.
If I do an interview, the question is, why you?
With respect, you know how people see you.
Spell it out.
Brandy, Andy.
With respect.
Make no mistake, if we don't get the tone right, the story won't be him. It'll be us.
Amazing!
Oh, did you like it?
Did you love it?
We've loved being with you all week.
He's loving the love.
There are 21 species in the Americas. This one is the large, hairy armadillo.
All that and more to come here on BBC Radio Scotland with me, Rona Dougal. And do get in touch with your thoughts on anything we're talking about this morning. You can drop me a text on 80295, that's charged at your standard message rate, or use the hashtag Shereen on social media. But first this morning, splitting the critics right down the middle, the actor Andrew Scott debuted in Netflix new drama Ripley on Thursday, the first TV adaptation of Patricia Highsmith's 1955 novel. It was already adapted for the big screen in 1999. Who can forget Matt Damon in the smash blockbuster The Talented Mr. Ripley? So, can that magic translate to this new 8-parter? If you're not already up to speed on the story, it's New York City, it's the 1950s, and grifter Tom Ripley is drawn into a world of wealth and privilege after taking a unique job in Italy. But to seize the life he wants, he must build a web of lies.
False IDs, bank letters. What's going on, Tom?
You crazy?
I don't trust him. He's a liar. It's his profession.
The corpse was found on the Via Antica, struck on the head by some heavy instrument.
My God.
This is what I do for a living. You're interfering.
I'd like you to leave.
I bet you would.
Someone is dead in Rome, and Signor Ripley is missing. This is the situation.
Well, there we go. Alison, what did you make of it?
I really liked it. I'm a sort of a big fan of the books and the previous films that there have been, but I thought this was better than the previous film, the Anthony Minghella 1999 one. That was the glamorous one with Gwyneth Paltrow, Matt Damon, Jude Law. I thought this was better because it was sort of slight. He was seedy. He was, as you say, a grifter. It was altogether darker than the Minghella film, which was very, very glossy. Still sinister, but I thought this was more menacing because of Andrew Scott and because of the way that it was shot in black and white. It made it seem like a classic noir tale, which it is, of course.
It made the Amalfi Coast look grimmer than the Clyde on a wet day, didn't it? Filming it in black and white. I'm not quite sure if I like that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you were looking for the glamour of the film, you know, you might have thought. But then again, it suited the New York scenes at first because, you know, the mono suited there. Yeah, I see what you mean about the foreign climes.
I mean, Paul, did you see the original film and how do you think it compared?
I did. I mean, I remember elements of it, particularly of how it looked, as Alison said, because it was very, very beautiful. But this one, I thought, I agree, I thought it was better. It's because of Andrew Scott and it's because of how stylised it is, and it's shot so beautifully at strange angles to, I guess, reflect the strangeness of Tom Ripley, the character, and what it is that he's been asked to do. He's been sent to Italy to bring back this shipping magnate's son who is, according to the father, just wasting his life using his inheritance and enjoying himself. Seems like a quite nice life to me.
Absolutely.
But off Tom Ripley goes, pretending to be something he's not. And there, as well as the sinister elements, certainly the first episode, there are a lot of comedic bits when he gets to Italy, and because it's on the coast, and he has to go up a lot of steps, up and down steps to try and get to Dickie Greenleaf's house. And Scott can do both these things. He can be somebody that you think, I would not send him out for a pint of milk. And also you can think, that he can do funny really, really well. And I guess that is the part of the chameleon character of a grifter, isn't it? That you have to pretend to be something that you're not all the time and do it with some kind of confidence. And the soundtrack was great. Roy Orbison, and then some jazz, and then when you get Italy, some great choral music, and it just, everything seemed so well rendered and well realised, and it pulled you in little by little. And I know that you'd mentioned that the critics were split because some people said that it was so glacial, it was so slow, but I loved that about it. It every step, every frame, you thought, I understand why they're doing this.
Yeah. Angela, you hadn't seen the original, so you were really seeing this with fresh eyes. Andrew Scott was mesmerising, wasn't he?
Yeah, you know the weird thing? See, the night before I watched this, and I didn't actually know what Ripley was, other than that I was going to watch it. I didn't know it was connected to the talented Mr. Ripley. And the night before I watched it, I actually very nearly watched The Talented Mr. Ripley. I was looking for something and this came up on my screen and I thought, oh, this is meant to be a really good film and I've never seen it. And yet I didn't watch it. So maybe it's fate. Maybe for some reason I'm supposed to get into this week. But so I thought, well, this will be good then because it's the same sort of story. And when it started, I was thinking, oh, you got to be kidding me. It's in black and white and I just don't like the vibe of these sorts of shows. I think it's for the more sophisticated TV types, not for me. But see, by the end of it, it was weirdly kind of mesmerising. And like Paul mentioned the scenes there where you see him, he's just walking up and down a lot of stairs. But for some reason, I couldn't stop watching, and I'm like, oh, this is not what I expected. So it's been done very, very well. It's very kind of atmospheric, setting a lot of the scene here, but somehow. Even though it is slow, and you would say that there's not a great deal happens in that first episode, but I was still finding myself at the end thinking, I really kind of want to see what happens here. And I didn't watch the second episode. I went on to watch something else that I wanted to see. But in the few days since, I keep thinking about it. Which is really weird. It's very, very unusual programme. I don't normally feel like that with programmes. Like, it just keeps coming back into my head. Like, I wonder what happens. So, yeah, strangely quite good.
Did you think Andrew Scott was the right choice, Alison, as the lead?
I did, because he has that sort of, air of he looks quite ordinary, but when you get close up to him, when you get his face, which is so important on television and film, you can see him acting, you can see him becoming a different person, you can see the emotions all over his face, which really works here, because the whole thing is about him feeling humiliated enough to take drastic action to get this person's life, and you can really see that in his face.
Will you go on and watch any more, Paul?
Yes, I started to watch the second one, but I ran out of time because of one thing and another. But I will watch, if it keeps the way it was in the first and the start of the second, I'll just go through the whole thing, because there is something about it that draws you in.
Okay, and Alison, will you continue? I have gone on to watch the next few, actually, and the glacial pace starts to get a bit annoying, I have to say.
Does it? Well, I'm not feeling the pace glacial at the moment, so yeah, we'll keep on with it.
Excellent. Okay, and all 8 episodes of Riley are available now on Netflix.
I don't watch breakfast telly. I'd rather get a tattoo of end-ups on my belly. Radio is better and Christmas is the king. He's funny and he's lost some weight and a couple of chins. The Chris Moyle Show. BBC Radio 1.
Still to come here on BBC Radio Scotland with me, Rona Dougal. We look at the first week of Scotland's new hate crime law. Are we further forward as a nation? Plus, from hate to love. But is the phrase "I love you" becoming devalued? But first, I'm here with my guests, Angela Haggerty, Alison Rowett and Paul McNamee. And it's time to get your moments of the week. Let's start with you, Angela.
Oh, this is a lovely one. A few weeks ago, a friend of mine who's got a little boy who's about the same age as my little boy, she gave me a gift for him, which was a little cup with caterpillars in it, which doesn't sound very appealing, but it's a thing that you can do. You can order these caterpillars online and you get sent a kit with the caterpillars and a butterfly net and a book, and it tells you all about how it works and everything, yada yada. So in this cup, they have all the food that they'll need, and you basically just leave them alone and watch them grow for a few weeks until they go into their chrysalis, which they stay in for about another week before they turn into butterflies. So I thought, all right, we'll give this a crack, and it's been wonderful. The little book that comes with it, since we got them, my son, it's like a storybook for kids, and my son has requested it every night since I could probably recite it from memory. He got so into it, he started talking about metamorphosis and chrysalises. There's a little bit at the back where they have different butterflies and caterpillars, and he's learned all the names of them. He's been fascinated by it, and it's amazing to watch the caterpillars grow. So this week, finally, after doing all of that and moving the chrysalises into the butterfly net that you get with it, they hatched, and we had 5 beautiful, healthy butterflies, and they were gorgeous, and it was just such a wonderful thing to watch. I was a wee bit worried about the ethics of it, because I started thinking, I don't know if it's ethical to get caterpillars in a cup and keep them in it. So I googled that, and there didn't seem to be any big movement against it. As long as you release the butterflies when they hatch, it's all good. I fell down a rabbit hole. I started studies about the effects of LED lighting on caterpillars and experiments to see what they can remember after the transformation. Safe to say I took it too far and then kept going. This was an experiment that became a much bigger thing than I thought it was going to, but I would so highly recommend it to any parents with young kids. I thought my little boy was going to be far too young to really get into it. I was so wrong. He was just a great age for it. I'd recommend having a look into it.
Oh, that is just so wonderfully wholesome. I love it. Alison, have you got a wholesome moment of the week?
Yeah, I think so. It was Mastermind, the grand final, and it was won, if you've seen it, you'll know, by a woman called Ruth Hart from Glasgow. And she was a charity engagement manager. Seen her before on the rounds coming up. She seemed a very nice person who had done her homework. So as it was in the final, she came on, stormed the first round, a specialist subject, which was Francis Bacon. And I thought, great, she's really going to win it. You know, the good person is going to win here. And then we got into the dreaded general knowledge round. And she wavered a wee bit. She got a couple of questions wrong. But she was just so icy cool, while everybody must have been at home, screaming at the telly. She was so cool, pulled it round, won by 2 points. So
that's fantastic, because it's such a prestigious win, that, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's the pressure, because, you know what it came from. The producer's original idea was to sort of represent an interrogation in World War II. So
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's why you have the darkened lights and the spotlights. So it's created to engender tension in a person. So she did brilliantly by just getting past all that.
Oh, that's brilliant, Paul.
Well, mine in life, I think that you try and you find milestone moments, whether they happen in the moment you think this is happening, or you look back and think that was significant. And it's not necessarily about measuring out your life in coffee spoons, but sometimes these things come along and you go, this is one of those moments. And it can be quite insignificant in its thing, but it represents something bigger. And this week, one of those moments happened. Our youngest, my son, is 17, and some of his friends are now passing a driving test, which, it's not significant, it's not insignificant, it's just something that happens in life. And this week, for the first time, he went out with one of his friends who'd passed the test in the car with them. And when his sister a few years ago was doing this, I didn't think anything of it. But he is our youngest, and he will be leaving home soon. And I thought that was a very significant moment that had come, that no longer will I need to be relied upon to drive people around, but he has got others who can do this now, and they're his friends and they're his age. And it just felt as though it was the breaking of something and the start of something else. And I thought it's both very happy for him, but also quite sad for me.
Oh, did you feel emotional?
I did feel
did
emotional.
You shed tears?
I cried at the drop of a hat, Rona. I mean, that butterfly story almost had me going there.
Well, Paul, dry your eyes and let's move on.
This is Shereen.
I'm Rona Dougal and my guests are Angela Haggerty, Alison Rowett and Paul McNamee. Now, freedom of speech and belief are at an end in Scotland if the accurate description of biological sex is deemed criminal, wrote J.K. Rowling this week. The author was referring to Monday's introduction of the Hate Crime and Public Order Scotland Act 2021. Under the law, an offence is committed if someone communicates material or behaves in a threatening or abusive manner with the intention of stirring up hatred based on protected characteristics, which are age, disability, religion, sexual orientation, transgender identity or being intersex. The maximum penalty is a jail sentence of 7 years. Rowling's objections focused on the inclusion of transgender identity as a protected characteristic, given that women, as defined by biological sex, were not afforded specific protection. Mrs. Rowling lives in Edinburgh but was abroad when she posted her comments on social media, in which she described 10 transgender women as men and dared Police Scotland to act. The force quickly decided that Rowling's posts were not criminal and declined the invitation to arrest her, saying it had received complaints but would not be taking any action. The Prime Minister would not be drawn on whether he supported her approach, saying that it was not right for me to comment on police matters, individual matters, but he added, we should not be criminalising people saying common sense things about biological sex. Clearly that isn't right. Meanwhile, the BBC understands that Police Scotland received more than 3,000 hate crime reports by mid-week, with a large number relating to a 2020 speech by First Minister Humza Yousaf, then Justice Secretary, highlighting white people in prominent public roles. Community Safety Minister Siobhan Brown said people were making false and vexatious complaints. There's also interest in how many complaints may arise from football matches this weekend, in particular the match between Rangers and Celtic tomorrow. The First Minister had this to say.
Police Scotland have managed to police Old Firm games and football matches for many, many years previously, done so very, very well. In my opinion, I've got every confidence in them being able to do so again for this weekend's match. And let me just be clear about the Hate Crime Act that's come into place. Remember, the new stirring up offences have a very high criminal threshold indeed. Your behaviour has to be threatening or abusive and intended to stir up hatred.
Ali McCoist raised concerns earlier in the week, telling TalkSport Radio, I can guarantee you next Sunday at Ibrox, I, along with 40,000 others, will be committing a breach of that hate bill in the particular Rangers-Celtic game we're all going to. Mr McCoist did not say which part of the hate crime bill fans were at risk of breaching and later said he won't be attending the game. Now, Paul, I've put a lot of detail into that introduction there just so people know exactly where we're at, because it has been a big bit of legislation and it's proved to be very controversial. How do you think it's panned out this week?
Probably as expected. Never has the word vexatious been uttered more or written more in any story that I can remember. It has become, as so many pieces of legislation and so many stories, it has become mired in culture war and where people want to place themselves in the culture wars rather than what the actual act is and what the act is supposed to do and the people it's supposed to protect. And therefore that is why the J.K. Rowling thing about transgender people became the headline first of all, but then quickly dismissed by police, because J.K. Rowling can say what she likes, and that is essentially enshrined in this piece of legislation. There's still the right to express ideas that offend, shock or disturb. You could argue whether her ideas did that or not, but she has the right to do that, which she did. What she doesn't have the right to do is be threatening and abusive and intend to stir up hatred. So therefore, I think what it has done is set out this new piece of legislation that is going to, I hope, help people and protect people who need that protection. At the same time, not press down on right to free speech. Although the right to free speech, I think, that is another thing that's become mired in culture wars, because you've a right to free speech, but you also got to accept responsibility. You can't just say anything you like. You've got to accept that if you do say something, there may be repercussions. whether or not there is hate bill legislation. I think it's an important piece of legislation. I think it's easy for the Scottish Government because it's something that they can do. They can show they're taking action that it doesn't cost much, so that they can move themselves away from necessarily Westminster. But I think it's positive. Just on a very personal note, a number of years ago, over 30 years ago, I was attacked in Northern Ireland, and it was quite brutal, and my front teeth knocked out, my nose broken, my cheekbone fractured, and I was in quite a bad way. And the reason I was attacked was because I was Catholic, and I know I was Catholic. It was the reason because they said it, called me Teg, Fenian, these kind of things, 4 blokes. I was 17 on the way home from a part-time job. They were convicted, and the conviction was raised because of the sectarian nature of it. And I think that until this hate bill legislation, had a similar attack happened in Scotland and been sectarian, the people involved may not have received the jail sentences they did in the attack on me, because there wasn't this threatening, abusive, and intended to stir up hatred. So I think it's a good thing that this legislation is there. It's easy to talk about the transgender element, but it is much wider than that.
Yeah, Angela, I mean, do you think it's going to benefit society?
Yeah, I do. I mean, just to follow on with what Paul said there, and that's just an awful story to hear. But back in 2012, I was actually the victim of a hate crime in Scotland. It was connected to my work. It was more verbal abuse rather than physical abuse. It was an online thing. I don't want to bore everyone with the details, but it was connected to my Irish Catholic identity as well, and someone was convicted as a result of that. And given the highest jail term I think they really could for that crime, and it was because it was aggravated by racial and religious prejudice. So actually, and this is one of the confusing things about this law, you would think that we have never had any provision for this in the past in Scotland, but actually we have had it. And as I understand it, the law just seeks to sort of clarify it and put it all in one place, in one act.
But do you think it has clarified it? It seems to many that it's muddied the waters.
Well, I mean, I'm beginning to be under the impression that a lot of people just didn't realise that we did have some provisions before, as if this is all completely brand new. It isn't totally brand new. And I think that what's happened this week is that with J.K. Rowling especially, you know, a lot of, call them gender critical activists, were saying that, you know, you wouldn't be able to talk about biological sex, that these things would be banned, it could be criminalised, etc., etc. And J.K. Rowling put herself out on a limb to test the law, to find out whether that was true or false. And we find out that actually what she said isn't a criminal offence under the law. So it did clarify that aspect of it anyway. I think with any new act, any new legislation, it's probably going to take a bit of time for us to see how it plays out in the courts when these charges arise. And then we'll understand whether we're getting clarification or whether it turns out to be something like the Offensive Behaviour at Football Act, where actually when that was going through the courts, you were starting to see where the cracks were and how inconsistent it was. So we do need a bit of time to see how it's being tested. But it's unfortunate that, as with these vexatious complaints that we keep hearing about, it's unfortunate that people are doing that, because come on, let's have a chance to see how this works properly. Let's not try to manipulate things just to prove points.
We might come back to the issue of football, what people say at football matches in just a wee second. But Alison, what did you think about J.K. Rowling throwing down the gauntlet to the Scottish Police on Monday?
I understand why she did it. I think it's a good thing that she did. It has clarified things for a lot of people. But I was kind of uneasy about the tone, the sort of combative tone that she took, you know, let's get this sorted out, and how it reflected on Scotland, etc. That I was uncomfortable with. I thought the debate certainly didn't need that. You know, it didn't need anyone else to add fuel to the fire. But so mixed feelings.
I mean, do you think, Paul, that things will eventually calm down? Because as we said, there's been I think it's nearly over 4,000 complaints now. I mean, how do you think it's going to pan out? Do you think people will just get used to it?
Yes, I think this is the flare-up that came with the start of it. It was an easy stick to beat the Scottish Government with. It was useful for particular commentators, particularly in some of the right-wing press coming out of London, to use this, and that will die back. Those complaints against Humza Yousaf, that was clearly coordinated. That wasn't just one or two people. So these things, it will move, it will retreat. And then it will allow, I know that one of the arguments is it puts a huge amount of pressure on the police to investigate everything. Well, they investigate the J.K. Rowling pretty quickly and we're able to dismiss it. So I think that there is some ability to analyse these complaints and do some element of that quickly, and there will be fewer of them. I think that this is furore around a moment of launch, and then we will see where we get to in the next few weeks and months.
I mean, do you think Police Scotland will be able to cope with it all? Because apparently they're getting online training and not all of them have had it.
Yeah.
And it's up to them to interpret, quite subtle laws.
Well, according to experts, the criminal threshold is so high that, that there shouldn't be any sort of debate about what contravenes the law and what doesn't. I think what people are also concerned about and confused about is whether, even if you are reported and investigated and they say, well, there's no charge to answer, that incident is logged somewhere and it could be used against you in future. So I think they need to clear up. That's what Murdo Fraser was trying to establish. So they need to definitely clear that one up.
OK, let's move on. And during the discussion, we did hear some language that none of us would condone, and we'd apologise if you were offended or have young ears listening this morning. Still to come here on BBC Radio Scotland with me, Rhona Dougal, an astonishing new look at nocturnal mammals from the beloved Sir David Attenborough. And as the report tells us, many over 65 still struggle with technology. Don't look at me. One journalist reckons modern tech just doesn't have enough knobs to twiddle. What do you think? Now, does this annoy you?
Amazing!
Oh, do you like it? Yay!
Oh, you made us cry.
Thanks,
Oh, do you like her? You made me cry quite a lot.
Do you love it? We've loved being with you all week.
Bring it in, bring it in. A job well done, everyone.
Baby, look at Danny.
He's loving the love.
And we're talking outpourings of love. And it's been annoying Times columnist Janice Turner this week. Whilst nursing a cold on the sofa, she counted how many times Sort Your Life Out presenter Stacey Solomon said, "Love you," during the show. She wrote at least 5 times to her husband when he rang every 5 minutes. And the show's grand reveal, when they've decluttered the nest, was a virtual confetti cannon of "I love yous" to cast and crew. Turner's theory is that the phrase has become a verbal tic and devalued. She wondered whether it's worse to hear it all the time from parents, relatives, partners, or to hear it only sparingly. Now, I'd just like to start this chat by saying, love you guys. Is it overused, Alison?
Sometimes it does irritate me when I hear people just say it as a sort of, when it becomes a sort of verbal tick, when they're saying goodbye on the phone and they're obviously been talking to a mate and it's all this, love you. It's like this, lovey darling people use when they can't actually remember your name. But I would defend Stacey Solomon to the hilt here. I think she's great. She's great for TV. She's great with the people that she deals with. And in that circumstance that they were playing a clip from there, it had been a particularly poignant episode of, this show in which she declutters people's lives and sort of gives them another chance at making their home their way. And she's a great thing. And it's, she's dealing with kids there. She's dealing with people who are a bit emotional. So why not just say it to make them feel comfortable?
Yeah, and it's part of her warmth, isn't it?
Yeah, and she genuinely feels emotion in the minute. So it's not faked.
Yeah. Angela, I think it's a kind of generational thing, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, my parents were born in 1940, and "I love you" was not something that was thrown around in the house. And I think because that's just the way that they grew up, and it wasn't really said. But I had friends at school who had parents who were younger than mine, and I used to hear them all say it quite a lot to each other. I thought, that's funny, isn't it? So when I had my little boy, I thought, I'm going to make a real effort here to tell him frequently that I love him, and I do that. I probably take it again too far. I tell him all the time. For me, the rule is, You can say I love you as freely and as often as you want to, but you have to mean it. So it can't just be I love you to everyone.
Yeah.
It has to be when you really mean it so that people know that it has that value.
Mm-hmm. Paul?
Oh, love you all.
He's been trying around his I loved yous all morning.
Don't start.
Listen, darling. I think you're right. It is generational, and I see it with my wife and my children who are very expressive with it, and I don't think there's a problem with it. In fact, I remember last year, maybe 2 years ago, when Colin Farrell won a Golden Globe for the Banshees of Inisherin, and on stage he just started talking to Brendan Gleeson, who was his co-star in the film. I said, "I love you. I just want to say this. I love you." And it was wholehearted. It felt very true, and I didn't see any problem in that. And I thought that it perhaps opened the door for people who were less able to express their emotions honestly to do that. So, just because one grouchy columnist is feeling grouchy with a cold on a sofa and wants to write something grouchy about that doesn't mean we all have to be grouchy. Well, but I still love her.
What's changed? Why are we saying it now? Why do we say it more? My dad has never said it to me. Oh, goodness, I'll start crying in a minute. But my goodness, he fitted kitchens for me and he maintained my car, and I've never been more sure of somebody's love.
I don't know. Sometimes we think it's an American thing. We're so used to, we all grew up with it, watching telly and Americans and, the great theory that every show has to end with hug, forgiveness and I love yous all round. So maybe we're used to that. But I think it's a great thing that mums and dads are not afraid to say that to their kids and vice versa.
Angela, I sometimes think it does become a bit devalued.
I think it's partly of it's the sort of therapy revolution as well, isn't it? Like talking about your feelings. I think there was a very American import there, but I don't think. I mean, how many times have you read or heard stories about someone where they say, "Oh well, someone died, and I really wished I'd told them I loved them," or what? I mean, I think we're all going to start crying here. So I think it's one of those things. You'll never regret saying it, but you might regret not saying it. So err on the side of safety there. Just say it if you feel it.
Would you agree with that, Paul?
Of course, I'm going to agree with that. I think
he loves her.
I think that's a wise thing to do. And I perhaps in the past I should have said it more, Rona. Mm-hmm. So yes, I am with Angela on that. Err on the side of caution.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to just tip you over there. And I told you guys listening that my dad fitted a kitchen for me this morning. I want to know the greatest act of love you've ever given or received. Text me 80295. Love you. I'm Rona Dougal, and my guests this morning are Angela Haggerty, Alison Rowett and Paul McNamee. Now, turning 98 next month hasn't stopped national treasure Sir David Attenborough from unleashing a brand new nature documentary on us, with this week's debut of his new BBC series Mammals, uncovering the secrets of their success. From the tiny terrestrial Etruscan shrew to the biggest of them all, the blue whale. It's the 140th TV series he's been involved in, yes, really, and the first in the 6-part series focused on creatures of the night.
In Argentina, as night falls, life starts to stir in an abandoned farm building. There are all kinds of smells drifting through the air, some powerful, some faint. And one nocturnal mammal has an extraordinarily sensitive way of detecting even the faintest of them. An armadillo. There are 21 species in the Americas. This one is the large, hairy armadillo.
hairy armadillos and the rest. In fact, they were quite lechy armadillos, weren't they? Alison, did you enjoy it?
I did. I mean, it was different. As you said, he's done so many of these things, but now they can start to sort of blend into one. This one was different because he was looking at, well, first of all, mammals, and the first episode was all about how they cope in the night. And apparently, we're a rarity among mammals in that we all, go to sleep, whereas most other mammals will go out to hunt and mate and do all sorts of other things. So that was fascinating because it involved a new filming technique, which was, you used to get the old night vision that was all green and blurry. Well, this was beautiful. This was like pin sharp, black and white. It was like some sort of, animated film.
And the moonlight shots were breathtaking, weren't they?
Yeah. I mean, again, that was coming back to noir, but here it was just beautiful.
Yeah. Paul, did you enjoy it? Did you learn anything?
I enjoyed it to an extent. I didn't love it. Some parts of it I thought, well, that is interesting and that looks beautiful. And I always think that the artistry of the camera work in these shows is beyond compare a lot of the time. And the end of it, when they were showing camera crews in the Tunisian desert, the sub-Saharan desert, looking for the fennec fox, this remarkable little creature with massive ears, and how long it takes, the patience it takes, and the habitat that they have to live in, and what you can learn about that. I think that is interesting. It just feels that have I seen this before? Have I seen this stuff about bats, its fingers and its skin between their big long fingers? It's not really wings. Oh, look, there's a murmuration of bats around a bridge. Isn't that beautiful? I didn't feel as taken by it as perhaps some of the others. And I do think, obviously, when David Attenborough goes, it's going to be a period of national mourning, and then who is going to voice over bats with long fingers? I don't know. Maybe the one with the wheels. I quite like wheels, and when they get into the water, maybe that will lift me more. But I didn't feel it as much as I probably was supposed to.
Angela, did you enjoy? I thought it was really fascinating. And it was all about creatures at night. And then yesterday afternoon, there was a fox ran across the road at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I thought that fox didn't see the documentary, doesn't know its place.
I thought it was, in terms of the next David Attenborough, by the way, I'd just like to say I think my son's shaping up pretty well after that experiment. But I did really like it. Do you know, the funny thing is with nature documentaries, it's not the kind of thing I would sit down and watch and think, oh great, that's on tonight. But if I turned the TV on and it was on, I'd kind of have to watch it to the end because they are just, the footage is fascinating. You can't not look at it. I usually come away from them having no idea really of anything the narrator said. I couldn't tell you if I learned anything because I'm just so fascinated by the footage. My main takeaway from it was that the fennec foxes were just really, really cute. And I thought it was funny when the coyotes were, in Chicago had learned how to cross the road safely. I thought that was quite funny as well. But the most remarkable thing of the whole thing for me is just David Attenborough. He's 98. He looks incredible, and he's just so passionate still for what he does. I just think that is amazing.
I know, he shows us all up. 98, good grief. And Mammals continues tomorrow evening on BBC One and iPlayer. Now, remember this classic beer advert. You know the brand, I'm sure, and if that's the sort of lager you're used to wetting your whistle with, a sage warning from the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office ahead of Euro 2024. It's urged travelling Scotland and England supporters to drink responsibly to avoid being barred from stadiums. The official advice reads, beer can be stronger in Germany than in the UK, so drink responsibly, know your limits and respect local laws. The average strength of lager and ale in the UK is around 4.4%, according to DrinkAware, but beers in Germany are often 4.7 to 5 8.4%. Did we really need this advice, Angela?
I just think it's sort of funny and kind of depressing that we have such a boozing culture that we need to be warned when we're going abroad that the booze might be a little bit stronger, so just be careful. I mean, see, you actually have a thing now in the UK, is it called craft beers? And they're a lot stronger than normal beer, and there's a whole culture around that. I don't know, I've never drank them, but I don't think it's that unusual now to get really strong strength beers, so it's a bit patronising really, but still sort of funny. It's just, I don't know, it's part of all of the weird coverage you get in the run up to a big footballing event that just starts to get you really into it.
Yeah, someone's thought this is a great angle. Alison, have you taken heed of these warnings?
I have. I can testify to the strength of German beer because I used to serve it. So I wasn't responsible, I don't think, for any calamities. But yeah, no, I mean, it's funny, isn't it, that suddenly we're all worrying about this again, whereas for the World Cup we were, talking about how people wouldn't be drinking and, how would they all cope with it. So this is quite a nice problem to have.
A nice problem to have, Paul?
Well, see, I think some people will see it as a challenge. That they'll think, oh yeah, 5.4, you say?
Absolutely.
Let's see this. And then a load of English fans and flip-flops and bad shorts will start throwing plastic chairs at French fans.
Good old days.
Yeah, it is quite patronising, but as we said here, there's going to be so much coverage on so many different wrinkles around this competition. This is just one of them.
Absolutely. Well, just remember, everyone, drink responsibly.
Parents, hey Dougie's here to help.
Oh, D is for a doggy hug. You look like you really need one, love.
E is for episodes ready to see, 7 minutes long and all ad-free.
F is for family car trips. Let Dougie help with screaming kids.
Parenting's like ABC with iPlayer and Hey Dougie.
Watch only on BBC iPlayer.
Your morning's just got better. The Saviour is here. His aftershave is Old Spice. His breath still stinks of beer. He laughs at famous people 'cause he just doesn't care. He looks like Terry Wogan, but he's got his own hair. Chris Moyle Show.
Coming up later today on BBC Radio Scotland at 11:30, it's Breaking the News. Jay Lafferty hosts Scotland's award-winning satirical news quiz with guests including Glenn Moore and Crystal Evans. Ray and Ali's guests on Off the Ball at 12 include the band Gun and Gary McNair. Sports Sound is on at 2. All the action from across Scottish football on Open All Mics. At 7 o'clock, Take the Floor. Gary Innes returns with the very best in traditional music, including a great concert recorded at this year's Celtic Connections Festival. And Billy Sloan is here at 10 with new releases from the Jesus and Mary Chain, Ed Harcourt and Lenny Kravitz, alongside classics from the Smiths, the Pixies and the Sweet. I'm Rona Dougal with you this morning on BBC Radio Scotland, and with me are Angela Haggerty, Alison Rowett and Paul McNamee. Now, we were talking about I love yous earlier, and Louise in Glasgow has texted us on 80295. She says, absolutely agree with Angela and Paul. My wee mammy died suddenly, and the one comfort I got was I knew I was loved by her, and she knew as well, as we told each other daily, and I do same with my girls. Alona from Lennoxtown, I grew up in a family who didn't habitually hug or kiss or say I love you, and when I saw others doing so, I felt envious and that my family and I were lesser beings. I have also regretted not telling certain friends and family members that I loved them, but as a good friend said, you didn't have to. They knew you loved them, and that was the same with my close family growing up. We didn't express our love vociferously or demonstrably, but because we didn't have to, it was a given. And this text says simply, love many, trust few, and always paddle your own canoe. That's brilliant. Thank you all very much indeed for your text. Now, a recent report from the charity Age UK warned that at least a third of over 65s are being left behind as more public services move to being online only. The report found that 4.7 million pensioners are unable to complete what are considered the 8 key tasks to using the internet. Now, hang on, let me see if I can do these ones. Being able to turn on devices, enter login details, use settings and controls, open applications, connect to Wi-Fi, open internet browsers, keep passwords secure, and change passwords when prompted to do so. Meanwhile, writing in the Times this week, Judy Graham suggested that it's a lack of knobs that do things that make text difficult to handle for older generations. Her theory is that jabbing at an ever-changing series of menus on a touchscreen is tough when compared to buttons, knobs and things that just make physical sense. Paul, I'm looking to you, not because you're the oldest, but I am such a Luddite, it's pathetic. And I'm scared of technology. Well, and I'm only 35.
Yeah, you are very young, the youngest amongst us. I think that there is a very good point here about the pace of change and people trying to keep up with the pace of change, and also about how actual people at the heart of things are left behind. So as technology races, it's not just knobs or trying to adapt to touch screens. It is when you try to get information or try to get help, and you have to go through a whole set of press 6 now. Now you must press 7 on the phone, and it's an automated message, and you don't feel as though you are going to get help or indeed are important, even though they tell you a lot of the time. So I think that things have raced so far ahead that I can see why people would feel, well, I just can't keep up with it. And like you, I'm a very poor adopter of technology. Probably there is a 10 to 15 year window here until people who are a little more native with touchscreens catch up. But that doesn't do an awful lot for people who are left behind at the moment, and increasingly left alone as town centres close, as facilities close. So I think it's not just the actual bits of kit themselves, it's everything around it. Society does feel as though it's turning its back on people who could use a little more help.
Yeah, interesting. Gerard in Aberdeen has texted us to say, I count myself in the older generation and remind youngsters that it was our generation which created the information revolution. Angela, do you think organisations almost see it as an annoyance now that they have to do anything analogue? I mean, do you think in 20 years' time that's just the way it's going to be? There's going to be no exceptions, no allowances?
I think as time goes on, yes, because the younger generations who've grown up with all this technology will be so immersed in it by the time they're getting to the ages 50, 60, 70 and beyond. So they'll know how to do it. And it's only going to be if there's more like transformative changes that it's going to again become difficult. But I think for the most part, we know the direction of travel that we're on. And it's a shame though, because it's still a lot of older people that don't know how to do this stuff, and they are just being left to try and figure it out or get someone else to help them. But I don't know. See when older people say, oh, we never had these problems when we were younger, technology worked perfectly. I'd just like to say car stereos and ovens, I don't think anyone ever figured out how to change the time on them, and they were all like twiddly knobs. So every generation has its problems.
Oh, I'm really embarrassed to say that I still haven't managed to change the time on my car. And sometimes I think, oh, it's only 6 months and then it'll be right again. What does that say about me, Alison?
Well, I'm with you on that. I've got the same problem. That's what I thought.
We're right for 6 months of the year. It's fine. I can live with that.
Live and let live. Yeah, let it go.
What do you think about the technology revolution then and people being left behind?
Yeah, well, they certainly are. I mean, if you want to open a bank account today, it's almost impossible to be able to do it sort of in person and do your banking in person and not be forced online. And when you think of the combined sort of economic power that older citizens have, we should just get together and say, right, we're boycotting you because you won't give us a book to mark up with our bank account details. Okay,
and we can all help older people like Paul out as well. Do your children help you with the tech?
That's one of the reasons why I'm so emotional about my son leaving and following his sister. I'm not sure I'll know how to switch on the television.
You're just going to be sitting in a dark, empty house.
I will be sitting in dark and silence and then thinking, how do I tell anybody about this? And I won't be able to because I can't get on the phone.
OK, well, here's something to cheer you up. Just time before the news to talk about Balmoral. The new private tours announced this week, all now sold out, I have to say, and costing up to £100 for a guided tour of the royal residence, or £150 including afternoon tea. I would hope at that price it's a decent afternoon tea. And Angela, have you signed up for this?
No, funnily enough. not a big royalist, but I'm not completely against it. You know, where I grew up in Isle of Bute, we had Mount Stuart House there, which was, you know, the landowner's big stately home, and we used to all go there for school trips and all sorts of things, and it was actually pretty cool to see the inside of it and all the rest, and I'm sure Balmoral will be the same, but the price is a bit steep. I say fleece the tourists, give them the high price, but the locals get to go in for like a tenner.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Alison, does this appeal to you? And is this the royal family trying to kind of be more accessible to the public, letting them in their doors?
I think so. They probably need the roof fixed as well. No, it doesn't appeal to me. I mean, it might do if it was like, if they had recreated the rooms, like maybe they have, the rooms where the Queen spent most of her time, that sort of thing, and you could, with their Tupperware boxes and a little 2-bar electric fire. I'd like to see all of that, but I'm not sure that you're going to see that in the tour.
Are we going to get access to rooms like that? Because you said, Paul, that you'd already been into Balmoral.
Yeah, you used to be able to get into the ballroom and wonder about bits. Maybe you weren't. I just did anyway. But I went
security,
and you could see elements of the house, and then you go down to the greenhouse that Philip made his own, and that was enough for me. Also, I want to know where is the money going? Who is the money being raised for? Is it going to the royal estate? Is it going to help local communities to invest in them? Why do they suddenly feel the need to charge?
Well, that's the impression I got, that it was for the upkeep of the building, but that's a good idea that it should go to local charities.
But it's obviously very popular because it's sold out, and it's sold out within 24 hours.
Yeah, and they have these tours at the Palace as well, and in London, which have been hugely popular since they started. So everybody wants a look behind the curtains.
Right. Buckingham Palace, would you?
I think they should
You've
open...
been there as well, had a wander around?
I was there for a press conference, a couple of press conferences, and it isn't that impressive. It's a bit tatty. But they can... I think they should open a huge volume of the royal palaces, charge people in, and then have less money come from the public purse for the royal family.
Excellent. OK, well, we're back after 11 with more on the big talking points of the week. We'll look at last night's debut of the new Netflix film, dramatising the lead up to the BBC's 29th interview with Prince Andrew, plus the joy of having the house to yourself, and why pop icon Lulu won't be speaking for at least another hour. with me, Rona Dougal, and my guests, journalist Angela Haggerty, Herald columnist Alison Rowett, and big issue editor Paul McNamee. And the four of us here will be reflecting on more of the big talking points this week, including Israel's response to its grave mistake that saw 7 aid workers killed in Gaza. In a moment, we're looking at Gillian Anderson's take on Emily Maitlis's 2019 interview with Prince Andrew, and we'll look at the joy of having the house to yourself, plus why Lulu won't be speaking for another 55 minutes. Can we learn anything from the pop icon's morning regime? Well, we reviewed Sir David Attenborough's new series Mammals earlier. We got a lovely text in from Rosie in Linwood who says, "My 6-year-old grandson Archie is obsessed with Attenborough and everything he has done. He often asks me to narrate everyday stuff in the style of Attenborough. The other morning I had to do David Attenborough to the makings of 2 slices of toast. I can't believe I'm having to do this, but here's a shot. This was me. So here we have 2 slices of bread. Bread which has been existing in the darkness of a humble kitchen cupboard." That wasn't bad. What do you think? Do get in touch with your thoughts on anything we're talking about this morning. You can drop me a text on 80295. That's charged at your standard message rate, or use the hashtag Shereen on social media. Now, it was one of the most astonishing TV moments ever. The 2019 episode of the BBC's Newsnight, which devoted 50 minutes to Emily Maitlis's forensic questioning of Prince Andrew. The main topic being his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, a sex offender who had died in custody 3 months earlier. The Prince maintained that he was innocent of any crimes himself, but the tone and language of his denials turned viewers against him. Perhaps it was inevitable that this would be turned into a drama. Surprisingly, though, there will be 2 of them to choose from. Amazon Studios is making a 3-part series produced by Maitlis herself and starring Ruth Wilson as Maitlis and Michael Sheen as Prince Andrew. But first, dropping yesterday was Scoop, a Netflix film directed by Philip Martin, who made several episodes of The Crown, with Gillian Anderson as Maitlis, Rufus Sewell as the Duke of York, and Billy Piper as TV news producer Sam McAllister. It promises to go deeper into the story behind the interview. Let's get a flavour.
An hour of television can change everything.
3 women in a whippet. Wouldn't have seen that in a BBC studio when I started.
The allegations surrounding Jeffrey Epstein include his friend Prince Andrew.
Sam, let's start pushing the palace. I want it for us.
You're chasing a story that we're never going to get.
This is the work. My job is booking the people we can't just call up.
Hello, everyone.
You have a problem that won't go away.
We're looking at options. But there is a red line.
I've never been smuggled into a palace before.
If I do an interview, the question is, why you?
With respect, you know how people see you.
Spell it out.
Brandy, Andy.
With respect.
Everything's changed. The FBI are raiding Epstein's home. You can't stay silent. South drawing room, 2 chairs, 6 feet apart.
It's like a Western. Make no mistake, if we don't get the tone right, the story won't be him. It'll be us.
Alison, tell us about the drama and the way it told the story.
The central character was the producer, Sam McAllister, so it shows you her at the beginning, just sort of trying to do a job, and basically what she's been asked to do over and over again is just book the sort of same old politicians, etc. And she thinks, you know, the Newsnight keeps just repeating the same story and it's very dull, etc. And she ought to get into the modern media age. So she then goes to an event and there's a possibility that she could get an interview, probably, you know, 1 in a million chance, but she tries it anyway. She keeps trying, and eventually the palace bites. And thereafter, they arranged the interview, not many conditions, and it played out as we saw.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I did enjoy it, but I did wonder that it was a bit too sort of media-lovey, navel-gazing. You know, it was all about the story and the getting of the story rather than the story itself.
Angela, this was supposed to be less about the big TV moment and more about the process leading up to it. Do you think people are fascinated enough by that. I think as journalists we are. To me, it seemed like a very easy, fairly straightforward process of getting the interview.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? So I think actually journalists watching this, like you and I, were going, well, she didn't really have to do a lot to get the interview. She just asked for it and asked a few times more, and she got it. Boom. But for the public, it was probably a bit more engaging than that, because the public aren't in the thick of these things all the time. So I think I think it actually did get the line okay with. Showing the journalistic side of it that we all know and love, but also showing it in such a way that it didn't get really boring for an audience of people who aren't journalists. So it's a really good watch, actually. And the fact, I like that it's only an hour and a half long, because you don't have to be invested for like 10 episodes just to get the story. It's something you can watch in a night, which is really good. I didn't realise actually that there's another version of this being made until you said that. That's interesting, because that's happened with a few TV shows. I think Disney Plus did Dope Sick, and then Netflix did, was it Painkiller, and this was about the opiates crisis in America. And then there was Disney also did Candy, about Candy Montgomery, the housewife who was accused of killing her lover's wife, and it was a big scandal in America. And there was another channel that did a version of it as well. It's really weird that you've got these streaming services competing against each other with the same story. So I wonder what the Ruth Wilson one will be like, because she's a really good actress as well. But I give a shout out to Billie Piper for Scoop, because I think she is really underappreciated. I think she's a great actress. I always love anything that she's in, and she's really good in this.
Paul, what did you make of the performances? And I mean, do you think it was worthwhile doing it? Because the most interesting bit about it, I thought, was the interview itself, and you can just go and watch the interview.
I thought it was very worthwhile doing it. I mean, for a start, it is just nice for a change for journalism to be represented positively, because in dramas, and frequently outside of dramas, journalists are there to be whipping boys or to represent everything that is wrong with society. So that was a positive. I thought that it was basically two things to it. One, it was to talk about the victims of Epstein, and therefore the people who were in Epstein's orbit, and bore responsibility to bring that to the fore. But also it was about the thrill of chasing a story, and when your antennae is up, and when you can smell the story, and when you know you're going for it. As Alison said, rather than having to retread the same old ground again, you finally have something and you go out and get it. And I thought that came across really, really well. And yes, of course, you can just go and watch the interview, but it wasn't just about the interview. It was all these aspects around it. And it may be that it was a little reductive, and it simplified things down, and it was, here's a few phone calls, a couple of visits to the palace, and boom, you've got one of the big history-changing interviews of our time. I haven't read the book, haven't read Sam McAllister's book. I suspect there's more in it, and it was a little more complex than that in order to get the interview. But I did enjoy it, and the performances were great. I thought Rufus Sewell as Prince Andrew was fascinating, because they were trying to do a character study of somebody who the palace thought was incredibly charming, and his representatives are always talking about this charm, where Sam McAllister was there cutting through. There were elements of class in this as well. Sam McAllister was there cutting through, talking about public perception, which was way beyond what the people reflected in themselves. And he had, I thought that he brought across this strangeness. And then at the end of it, when he came out of the bath and he was standing, and it was the Emperor's new clothes. It was just this overweight, unpleasant man who couldn't quite believe that this is what the world was suddenly around him. And I thought it was a really good piece of television.
Yes, and it is interesting, as Angela said, that there's going to be another version. I suspect Sam McAllister won't be the heroine of that one, because it's Emily Maitlis producing that one.
Well, that'll be interesting to see, because the rest of the press have done their best to try and whip up sort of enmity in a story that there's rivalry between the two productions, typically. But Emily Maitlis has said it's very different. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, does it shed any new light on anything, do you think, Angela? I tell you what I learnt is that BBC presenters are allowed to bring their dogs into work.
Yeah.
I nearly went and hired one.
I don't think really that you felt like you were learning anything new, but I don't think that was the point of it. But I did also think that, you know, it was a little bit depressing in this day and age that the bread and butter of journalism, which is going out there and getting the story, getting a good, important story, was, you know, it must feel so unusual in modern Britain that within a few years Netflix have made a TV show about it. You know, it just feels like we should be doing this all the time in the UK, and rather than it being like an exception that's worth celebrating with 2 different TV series about it.
Although the Sam McAllister character got that point across when she was saying, you know, out there in the real world, you know, news is what people are talking about, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, though, you did get a sense of the magnitude of what a big deal it was for a member of the royal family to do a sit-down like that, you know, watching the video screams out on the streets and, you know, the fallout from it. I did get a real sense of that.
Yeah, that definitely came across. And it wouldn't have been quite such a big get if that wasn't going to happen. But you're right, that idea that after it, you know, again, dramatic license, but that after it on Trafalgar Square on Piccadilly Circus on the big screen, that's all that was talked about. And because of that, the repercussions for him was that he had to step back from public life, essentially.
I thought that was done really well. And just before we go, Gillian Anderson has suggested that she might be involved in a new X-Files reboot. Would you be up for that,
Yeah,
Alison?
definitely.
Yeah. Paul?
Yeah.
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 He's not loving that one.
Angela, the truth is still out there, obviously.
Yeah, why not? Gillian Anderson's great.
Yeah.
So let's go for it.
Have her in everything.
Absolutely. Okay, Scoop is available now on Netflix. Still to come here on BBC Radio Scotland with me, Rona Dougal. We'll look at the official report into the killing of 7 aid workers in Gaza this week. Can charities have confidence that they'll be safe as new aid routes are opened? Plus, 60s superstar Lulu has revealed that she never speaks until noon. Could you benefit from a silent morning? Now?
I feel it in my fingers. I feel it in my toes. Christmas is all around me, and so the feeling grows.
Bill Nye's singing voice in full effect in Love Actually. And this week, speaking to The Guardian, he said that recording those scenes were some of the happiest times of his life, and added that living by himself allows him to enjoy music more than ever before. He said, "I listen to music all day long and I dance on my own at home, which is one of the greatest pleasures of living alone. I've danced naked in the privacy of my front room, but you need shoes to really spin." I'm not going to ask if any of you dance naked in your front room, but I don't know if you ever lived totally by yourself, Alison, and did you enjoy it?
I did for a spell, and I didn't enjoy it. It was sort of weird. I had a dog, and after 15 years, she departed. So I kind of felt as though I couldn't get another one, you know, as you do. Mm-hmm. And just I remember coming home and it hitting me, just the quietness of the place, how different it felt, not having life in it somewhere else. A presence.
Yeah, well, I've never lived on my own, but Angela, you have for quite a lot of your adult life, haven't you?
Yeah, from the ages of 17 to 34 when I had my son, for the majority of that time, with a few spells in between where I lived with other people, but majority of it I lived on my own. And I loved it. I couldn't rave enough about it. You know, coming home to an empty house after a long work week and just being able to chill out, have a nice bath, have a weekend with yourself, go to the cinema, go to a museum, or just stay in and watch the telly, whatever you feel like. And I did also play a lot of loud music and dance around, but unfortunately for my neighbours, it's heavy metal that I like, so I think they probably wish that I did live with other people.
I'm going to say I'm glad I didn't live next door to you during that period. Paul?
I think, well, I lived for a short period on my own when I was much younger, and I enjoyed it thoroughly for those number of months. But I was also thinking that Bill Nighy is well on the way to becoming a national treasure, and he potentially could fill the Attenborough-shaped hole and do some voiceovers. I would like to hear Nighy with that curious voice narrating about chimpanzees going to sleep in trees.
But he's not into wildlife, is he?
Who cares?
Is that
Who
irrelevant?
cares? If we're looking for a replacement, also he's so well tailored. His suits are always so great. I think have him on a split screen, so it's Nighy very well tailored at a microphone talking about baboons or something
So he's
like
not
that.
going to be in the jungle?
No, absolutely not. Bill Nighy would not be in a jungle, no.
Well, if he did, he'd be in an immaculately tailored safari suit or
Yes,
something.
indeed, yeah.
Wouldn't
Though
he?
that's starting to get quite Alan Partridge now.
I mean, I've never really lived on my own. Well, I mean, I'm a twin. I shared a womb and a room with my twin for, 18 years. I mean, is that a feeling you like, Alison? Does the house feel a bit spooky or...?
I think it feels spooky. I mean, I get it's usually, I tend to find it's usually kids who grew up in a household where there were lots of kids who like, the sort of the feeling of being alone. And I get, that it's great to have the weekend to yourself, etc. But it's not every weekend you want to do that.
Yeah, at the risk of reducing you to tears, Paul, I mean, you will soon be on your own. Well, with Jane, your lovely wife, of course. Is that something you look forward to?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I like the idea of more freedom to go and do things. I think that there is, as Alison said, there is a very real difference between a house that feels empty because there's something missing from it, and the difference between you being on your own and going back to your empty house because that's how you've chosen to live, and the sense of breath and soul and those other things, whether it's a human or an animal companion that's there waiting for you. Although I suppose if you're living on your own, you're still allowed to have a dog. There's no law against that.
Marion in East Kilbride says, totally agree with Alison. I love living alone, but feel the house is so empty without a pet since my cat died. I've just registered with Dogs Trust. Well, do you love having the house to yourself, and what do you get up to? Please don't try and top Bill Nighy, though. Text me 80295.
As the end of the season draws closer,
BBC Radio Scotland has you covered. You took the one straight out of my mouth. If you did scores!
catch the action and talking points.
Have they got enough to stay up?
This is a side chasing down a title.
We quite happily come to this fixture every week.
The banter and laughs.
What is it, the night Wally F. Aberdeen won and you're going out to paint the town red?
Scottish football lives here. Last minute winners, last minute equalisers.
We've got some huge games for you with so much at stake.
But all eyes on this one as Rangers and Celtic go head to head.
Off the Ball and Sports Sound. Saturday and Sunday on BBC Radio Scotland.
It's like home and we're coming home tonight. Nashville Fairgrounds Sports Arena, 8 o'clock bell time. Box office opens at 6. We're going to kick it off with Badass Brown against Flamboyant Farron Fox. And after that, who the hell knows what's going to happen? See you out there tonight. Nashville Fairgrounds Sports Arena, 8 o'clock. Don't miss our return tonight.
Coming up later today on BBC Radio Scotland at 11:30, breaking the news. Jay Lafferty hosts Scotland's award-winning satirical news quiz with guests including Glenn Moore and Crystal Evans. At 12 o'clock, it's Off the Ball with Ray Bradshaw and Ali Defoy, and their guests include the band Gun and Gary McNair. At 2 o'clock, it's Sports Sound, all the action from across Scottish football on Open All Mics. And Billy Sloan is here at 10 with new releases from the Jesus and Mary Chain, Ed Harcourt and Lenny Kravitz, alongside classics from the Smiths, the Pixies and the Sweet. I'm Rona Dougal with you this morning on BBC Radio Scotland with my guests Angela Haggerty, Alison Rowett and Paul McNamee. Now, 2 senior Israeli military officers have been sacked after 7 aid workers were killed on Monday in missile strikes in the Gaza Strip. The Israel Defence Forces called the killing of staff from the charity World Central Kitchen a grave accident. Drone operators did not follow rules and thought the cars were carrying Hamas gunmen, its inquiry says. The charity called the IDF's apology cold comfort for the aid workers' families and urged an independent investigation. On Thursday, after speaking to President Biden, Israel's Prime Minister announced that Israel had approved the opening of 2 humanitarian routes into Gaza to allow more aid into the territory. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak is facing growing pressure over UK arms sales to Israel, with the Lib Dems, SNP and a former UK National Security Advisor calling for sales to be suspended. The PM says the UK has a very careful arms licensing regime. OK, well, let's reflect on this week's strike on the aid workers. Paul, I mean, it was such a terrible tragedy what happened to these aid workers.
Yes, it was a terrible tragedy, and given that the aid workers' symbol was displayed on the car, and given that we're told that the Israeli Defence Force have got such precision weapons, you do wonder how such a terrible thing could happen. But then it does feel a little uncomfortable that it takes the killing of some aid workers to really stiffen the resolve of governments over what is happening in Gaza. Because it some time ago moved from Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas to something that is now leading to famine, that is leading to the UN having to come up with a new description for children who have lost parents and lost limbs. It is such an horrific situation in Gaza at the moment that I think that while you can condemn the killing of the aid workers, it goes a little further than that now.
What did you make of Israel's response, Angela?
I think that the context is kind of important here. Everyone's really shocked that Israel's done this. Israel has actually got previous for killing foreign nationals. Rachel Corrie and Tom Herndl, he was a photographer and Rachel Corrie was an activist. This is back in 2003, 2004. One was killed by an Israeli sniper and one by an Israeli bulldozer. And Israel never faced any great consequence as a result of that. And I think what we're seeing is that Israel has been used to, for many, many years, being able to do things that are beyond the pale and wouldn't be acceptable in other countries and more or less get away with it. So what seems really shocking to us for this to have happened, if you know of other incidents that have taken place, you can see why Israel maybe thought that this was something that they could sort of skirmish over, but it's obviously not playing out that way now, because the world's eyes are on Gaza and the destruction that's been caused and the number of civilians that have been killed in a very ruthless way, and that is not acceptable. So yes, it's good to see that the West are trying to rein it in now, but that should have happened at the start of this war, when it was becoming so clear that innocent people and a lot of children were losing their lives or being maimed, because this is devastating, and we'll be dealing with the consequences of those actions for a long, long time.
There's growing calls now for the UK to end arms sales to Israel. Alison, do you think that will happen?
It would be very difficult for them to do so without upsetting the White House, although this morning, as the news is reporting, the backlash within the Democrats is such that 40 of them have written to Joe Biden now calling on him to end arms sales. And the more this becomes an issue in the presidential election, that's the direction of travel that it's going in.
Yeah, I mean, it's pivotal what the White House thinks, isn't it, Paul?
It has felt that way, although Netanyahu does seem to be such a law unto himself that even when in the past, if the White House has spoken to Israel, that tends to be the only foreign power that Netanyahu particularly will listen to. But he doesn't seem to be paying quite so much attention to Biden as maybe previously. So there's absolutely no way of knowing how this is going to play out anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we will just have to wait and see what happens, but we'll leave it there for just now.
Quiet! Hush your mouth.
quite enough of that, Lulu, because by her own admission, the 60s superstar often doesn't use her voice before noon. So we've got a good half hour to go before we'll get another peep out of her. She told the BBC this week, I don't speak before 12 noon. I can understand why you think I'm lying, but no, I'm very disciplined. I exercise my voice, all that stuff. I watch my diet, and I don't speak before 12 noon when I'm on tour. It's not a big deal. I've done total silence for weeks. What did you think of this, Angela?
I have a 4-year-old. I would love to do silence. Those days are gone. That's one thing I miss about living on my own, let me tell you.
But it shows how dedicated she is to maintaining her voice and all the rest of it, yeah?
Yeah, she has. Also, I remember reading that Nicole Kidman, who's very pale, very rarely goes out in any kind of sunlight. She's very covered up and actually avoids a lot of daylight because she's so protective of her skin. So some people really suffer for their art.
Sounds like a vampire or something. Angela, it's quite funny, this story, wasn't it? Although you're not a Lulu fan, are you?
I have experienced concerts with her.
And?
Particularly when New Year's Eve one. No, not really a fan. And that one in particular, I mean, just there, I think there should be a kind of warning before you play that whale clip. Trigger warning.
But Paul,
you're quite afraid.
You're a massive Lulu fan.
The ongoing obsession with Lulu, the cult of Lulu, is baffling to me. And I'm sure her fans will say, Paul, you're a fool, and I could name you an album's worth of great tracks. One song, that is a long career out of one song.
Yeah, well, when I said to my husband that Lulu didn't speak until noon, he said, what a great idea. Why don't you do that until tea time every day? And I said, I'm not a performer. And he said, I know. But, Lulu, does another one of her eccentricities, Alison?
No, because I've heard like opera singers and I've actually heard radio presenters saying it as well, that they ease off their voice, before they go into work.
Oh, well, I never shut up. But we will have to leave it there. Thank you all very much indeed for joining us. And if you have any more texts about David Attenborough, or if you want to hear any more of my impersonations, feel free. I'm totally up for having a shot at it. OK, my thanks to Angela Haggerty, Alison Rowett and Paul McNamee. Join me, Rona Dougal, here on BBC Radio Scotland at 10 next Saturday, where my guests will be Hannah McGill, Brian Beacom and Murray MacDonald. Tam and Stewart are on their way at 12 with Off the Ball. Now it's comedy with Jay Lafferty in Breaking the News.